Alara had learned to make herself small. It was a strange skill for someone who'd been raised to command attention. For 26 years, she'd been groomed to be a Luna, posture perfect, voice modulated, every gesture calculated for grace and authority. Beta Gregor's daughter, the one chosen to stand beside the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, until 6 months ago when Alpha King Magnus had looked at her across the formal presentation hall in front of 5 visiting packs and half the nobility of the North, and said flatly, "You're not what I'm looking for. Not, I choose another candidate. Not, perhaps in the future." Just a dismissal so complete, so public, that Alara's father had refused to look at her during the 3-day journey home. She'd been sent away within the week. Beta Gregor couldn't bear the sight of his failure of a daughter. Fernwick Pack had taken her in, a small border territory that owed her father old debts. They'd given her a room in the pack house and work in the clinic, menial tasks, organizing supplies, cleaning instruments, anything to keep the disgraced Luna candidate occupied and out of sight. 6 months, and Alara still flinched when anyone said the word rejection. The afternoon was cold and gray, threatening rain. Alara walked through the pack grounds with her cloak pulled tight, a basket of medicinal herbs tucked under her arm. She kept her eyes down, her posture carefully neutral. Not too proud, that would remind people what she'd lost. Not too meek, that would invite even more contempt. Laughter erupted from the training yard, not the good kind, the cruel kind that made Alara's stomach clench with familiar dread. She shouldn't look, should keep walking to the clinic, mind her business, stay invisible. But something in those mocking voices pulled her toward the yard's entrance. A circle of young males, maybe 10 or 11 years old, surrounded someone on the ground. Their faces were twisted with that particular ugliness that came from children learning cruelty from adults. "Get up, cripple," one of them jeered. "Yeah, show us how fast you can run," another laughed. In the center of the circle, a boy sat on the cold stone. He was thin, dark-haired, maybe 11 or 12 years old. His face was flushed with humiliation and anger. But what caught Alara's attention was his leg, twisted at an unnatural angle, clearly an old injury that had healed wrong. The boy, Kai, she remembered his name, tried to push himself up using his arms. His bad leg wouldn't support his weight properly, and he stumbled, falling back to his knees. The young males howled with laughter. "Maybe if you crawled, you'd move faster. The pack should have left you to die when you were born. You're useless." Kai's hands clenched into fists against the stone. His jaw was tight, but Alara could see the way his shoulders shook. He was trying desperately not to cry in front of his tormentors. And standing off to the side, not intervening, were 3 Omega females, Senna, Marta, and Joran. Adult wolves who should have stopped this. Instead, they watched with expressions ranging from indifference to cruel amusement. "He brings it on himself," Senna said loudly enough for Kai to hear. If he'd just accept his place and stop trying to train with the other boys, they'd leave him alone. "Can't blame them for getting frustrated," Marta added. "Having to work around a cripple slows everyone down." Something in Alara's chest cracked open. A door she'd kept locked for 6 months, holding back all the rage and hurt and shame of her own very public humiliation. She'd been powerless then, voiceless, forced to smile and curtsy and accept her dismissal with grace, because anything else would have brought even more shame on her family. But she wasn't standing in front of the Alpha King anymore. And this wasn't about her. Alara dropped her basket and strode into the training yard. Her red cloak billowed behind her, the only piece of her old wardrobe she'd kept, too fine to wear normally, but armor when she needed it. "That's enough." Her voice rang across the yard with the authority of someone who'd been trained since birth to command. The young males startled, turning to stare. The Omega's expression shifted to surprise, then disdain. Alara walked through the circle of boys, placing herself between them and Kai. She didn't look at the boy yet. First, she needed to deal with his tormentors. "This training yard is for pack wolves learning combat skills," Alara said, her tone glacial. Not for cowards who gang up on someone weaker than themselves. One of the boys, Mikkel, the Pack Beta's son, puffed up indignantly. He's not Pack, not really. He can't fight, can't hunt, can't do anything useful. He's just what? Alara cut him off. Just someone you can abuse because you know he can't fight back? That makes you feel strong, does it? Brave? Mikkel's face flushed. You don't get to lecture us. You're nobody. A rejected Luna candidate who couldn't even secure a mate bond with one of the most powerful alphas in the territory. Yes, I'm aware. Alara's smile was sharp as broken glass. That rejection has taught me quite a bit about cruelty and cowardice. I'm an expert now. And what I see here is a group of young wolves who will grow up to be exactly the kind of petty, cruel adults who kick those beneath them because they're too weak to face anyone stronger. The Omegas shifted uncomfortably. Senna's expression darkened. This doesn't concern you, Alara, the older Omega said coldly. The boy needs to learn. The boy needs to be left alone. Alara turned her full attention on the three adult females. And you three should be ashamed. You're Omegas. You know what it's like to be considered lesser, to be dismissed, to be judged on circumstances beyond your control, and instead of protecting a child from bullies, you're enabling them, justifying their cruelty, making excuses. We're being realistic, Marta protested. The Pack can't afford to waste resources on what? On a child? On someone who was born different? Alara's voice rose. When did we become the kind of pack that measures a wolf's worth by their ability to run or fight? What about intelligence, kindness, resilience? Or do those not matter anymore? Silence fell across the training yard. Other pack members had stopped to watch, drawn by the confrontation. Alara felt her face burn. She was making a scene, drawing exactly the kind of attention she'd been trying to avoid for 6 months. But when she glanced back at Kai, saw the stunned hope in his eyes, she couldn't bring herself to care. Go, she said to the young males. All of you. Before I report this to Alpha Thorn, and let him decide if young wolves who torture the weak deserve to continue their training. Mikkel looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Alara's expression made him think better of it. He muttered something under his breath and stalked away. The other boys followed, casting resentful looks over their shoulders. The Omegas lingered longer, their faces twisted with contempt. You're going to regret this, Senna said quietly. Making enemies over a crippled nobody. I've survived worse than the dislike of 3 bitter Omegas, Alara replied evenly. I'll manage. They left, but not before Senna shot Kai a look that promised this wasn't over. Finally, Alara turned to face the boy she'd defended. Kai was still on the ground, staring up at her with wide, disbelieving eyes. Up close, she could see the evidence of regular abuse, bruises in various stages of healing, a split lip that was only a few days old, the careful way he held his ribs. Are you hurt? Alara asked, her voice gentling. Kai shook his head mutely. Can you stand, or would you like help? For a moment she thought he'd refuse out of pride. His jaw clenched and his eyes darted to the watching pack members. Accepting help would be another sign of weakness, another thing for them to mock. But then his leg buckled again when he tried to rise, and practicality won over pride. Help, he said quietly. Please. Alara crouched down and offered her arm. Kai gripped it and pulled himself up with more upper body strength than she'd expected. He kept his weight on his good leg, using her for balance. Standing, he came up to her shoulder. Thin and underfed, but taller than she'd realized. 11 or 12, awkward and gangly in that way of boys on the cusp of puberty. Old enough to fully understand every insult, every rejection, every moment of cruelty. Old enough to feel the shame of it all the way to his bones. Thank you, Kai said, his voice rough. He wouldn't meet her eyes. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Alara kept her voice matter-of-fact as she helped him limp toward the edge of the yard. Where do you live? The dormitory, with the other orphans. Kai's tone was flat. But I can get there myself. You don't have to. I'm walking you there anyway. Alara adjusted her grip to support more of his weight as they moved slowly across the grounds. Those boys might decide to continue their entertainment. Kai was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly, she almost missed it. Why did you help me? The question hit harder than it should have. Why had she helped? She'd spent 6 months avoiding conflict, keeping her head down, accepting her reduced station with as much grace as she could manage. But seeing Kai surrounded by his tormentors, watching adult wolves enable the abuse instead of stopping it, something in her had snapped. Because no one helped me, Alara said finally. When I was rejected, when I was humiliated in front of everyone I knew, no one stood up and said it was wrong. They just watched. And some of them laughed. So I suppose I helped you because I know what it feels like to be powerless while others tear you apart. Kai's hand tightened on her arm. I'm sorry that happened to you. The simple empathy in his voice made Alara's throat tight. This boy, who had every reason to be bitter and self-focused, was offering her comfort. And I'm sorry it's happening to you, she replied. They reached the dormitory, a squat stone building that housed orphans and low-ranking pack members without families. Kai stopped at the door, pulling away from her support to stand on his own. I can handle it from here. His chin came up with stubborn pride. Thank you again, Lady Alara. Just Alara. I'm not a lady anymore. She studied his bruised face, the careful way he held himself. Kai, how often does this happen? The bullying? He shrugged, looking away. Often enough. And you've reported it to Alpha Thorn? A bitter laugh. The Alpha doesn't have time for complaints from crippled orphans. He barely knows I exist. That, Alara thought with a surge of anger, was going to change. Get some rest, she said aloud. And Kai, if they bother you again, find me. I'm usually at the clinic or in the herb gardens. Kai looked up at her with something that might have been hope, struggling against years of learned helplessness. Why would you keep helping? You'll just make yourself a target. Then, I'll be a target. Alara managed a small smile. I'm already a failure and a disgrace. Might as well be a target too. She left before he could argue, retrieving her dropped basket and heading toward the clinic, but she felt the weight of watching eyes the entire way. She'd made a statement today, challenged the social order, put herself between the pack's outcasts and their tormentors. There would be consequences. Alara just hoped she was strong enough to face them. The consequences arrived faster than expected. That evening, as Alara prepared medicines in the clinic, the door slammed open. Senna stood in the entrance, her face twisted with malicious satisfaction. Alpha Thorn wants to see you, the Omega announced, immediately. Alara's stomach dropped, but she kept her expression neutral. She washed her hands carefully, dried them, and followed Senna through the pack house. Alpha Thorn's office was on the 2nd floor, a practical space filled with maps, patrol schedules, and reports. The Alpha himself sat behind a massive desk, his expression weary. He was maybe 35, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome before grief and responsibility carved hard lines into it. Beside him stood his daughter, Mira. 15 years old, with her mother's delicate features and her father's stubborn jaw. She looked uncomfortable. Alara, Thorn said without preamble. I've had 3 separate complaints about your behavior in the training yard this afternoon. May I ask what the complaints were, Alpha? That you verbally attacked young pack members who were engaged in normal training exercises, that you accused respected Omega members of neglect, that you made a scene over nothing. Thorn's tone was flat. The Beta is particularly upset that you embarrassed his son. With respect, Alpha, I didn't embarrass anyone who wasn't already behaving shamefully. Alara kept her voice level. I intervened in a situation where a disabled child was being tormented by a group of his peers while adult pack members watched and did nothing. Kai needs to learn to handle himself, Senna interjected from where she'd positioned herself by the door. Coddling him won't make him stronger. There's a difference between building character and torture, Alara shot back. What I witnessed was cruel and unnecessary. Multiple young males attacking one boy who can't properly defend himself because of a physical disability. That's not training. That's abuse. Thorn rubbed his face tiredly. Kai has always struggled to fit in. He was born with that leg, and his parents died when he was young. The pack provides for him out of charity. The pack tolerates him, Alara corrected quietly. There's a difference. You've been here 6 months, Alara. You don't understand our dynamics. I understand cruelty just fine, Alpha. I'm intimate with it. Something flickered in Thorn's expression. Sympathy, maybe. Or just exhaustion. Dad, Mira spoke up hesitantly. I think Alara has a point. The younger boys have been getting worse with Kai. I've seen it too. Mira, this doesn't concern you, Thorn said, but his tone had softened slightly. It concerns all of us if we're letting kids get bullied. Mira's voice strengthened. Mom always said a pack was only as strong as how it treated its weakest members. Kai is weak. We're treating him terribly. So what does that say about us? Silence filled the office. Thorn stared at his daughter with an expression Alara couldn't quite read. Pain, definitely, and something that might have been pride. Your mother did say that, he acknowledged quietly. Then to Alara, I don't have time to police every interaction between pack pups. If Kai is being bullied, he needs to report it. He did report it, apparently, multiple times, and was told you didn't have time for complaints from crippled orphans. Thorn's face darkened. Who said that? Does it matter? The message was received. Kai doesn't matter. His suffering doesn't matter. He should accept his place and be grateful the pack hasn't thrown him out entirely. That's not, Thorn started, then stopped, his jaw clenched. I never said that. No, but your indifference did. It was probably too far, too confrontational. Alara waited for the explosion, for the order to leave the pack, for another very public humiliation. Instead, Thorn just looked tired. What do you suggest I do about it? He asked finally. The question surprised her. Pardon? You're clearly passionate about this. You've made yourself a target defending a boy you barely know. So tell me, what would you have me do? I can't shadow Kai every moment. I can't force the other pups to accept him. I have 200 wolves to lead and protect. How do I fix this? Ilara's mind raced. She hadn't expected him to actually listen. Assign consequences for the bullying. Make it clear that harassing Kai or any disabled or weak pack member will result in real punishment. Loss of training privileges, extra duties, whatever it takes to make it not worth their while. She spoke quickly, ideas flowing. And give Kai something to do. Some way to contribute that doesn't require physical strength. Make him useful so the pack has to see his value. He's 11 years old. Old enough to learn a trade, herb lore, record keeping, equipment maintenance, things that matter but don't require running. Alara hesitated, then pushed forward. I could teach him, in the clinic, if you approve. Thorn studied her for a long moment. Why? What's your interest in this boy? I don't have an interest. I have empathy. Alara met his gaze steadily. I know what it's like to be the pack's failure, to have everyone watch your humiliation and do nothing. I can't change what happened to me. But maybe I can help him. Or maybe you're projecting your own issues onto a child and using him to feel better about yourself, Senna interjected coldly. Maybe, Alara admitted. But at least I'm trying to help instead of standing by while a child suffers. Thorn raised a hand, cutting off whatever Senna was about to say. Fine. Kai can work with you in the clinic, if he agrees, and if I hear one complaint about him being coddled or given special treatment, this arrangement ends. Understood? Yes, Alpha. Alara's heart raced with something that might have been hope. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The boy might not even want your help. Thorn's expression was skeptical. Dismissed, all of you. Alara left the office with her mind spinning. She'd just committed to taking responsibility for a traumatized, disabled child she barely knew. But when she thought about Kai's face, the desperate hope struggling against learned helplessness, she knew she'd done the right thing, even if she had no idea what she was doing. Kai didn't show up at the clinic the next morning, or the morning after that. On the third day, Alara went looking for him. She found him in the dormitory's common room, hunched over a book that was falling apart at the binding. His bad leg was stretched out in front of him, and he had a fresh bruise blooming across his cheekbone. New injury? Alara asked, making him jump. Kai slammed the book shut and scrambled to stand, wincing when his leg protested. Lady, I mean Alara, I didn't expect… You shouldn't be here. Why not? This is the dormitory, for low-ranking wolves. It's not appropriate for someone like you. Someone like me? Alara raised an eyebrow. A disgraced Luna candidate? I think I fit right in with the low-ranking wolves, don't you? Kai's mouth opened, then closed. He clearly didn't know what to say to that. Alara sat down on the bench beside him, deliberately casual. Alpha Thorn approved you working with me in the clinic, learning herb lore and medical assistance. Why haven't you come? Kai looked away, his jaw tight. Because it's pity. It's opportunity. Same thing. It's really not. Alara kept her voice gentle. Pity is empty sympathy. Opportunity is offering you skills that have value. Skills that make you useful to the pack in ways that don't require physical perfection. The others will say, I'm getting special treatment. The others already torment you. Why do you care what they say? Because… Kai's voice cracked slightly. Because I already don't fit, already don't belong. If I accept help, it just proves they're right. That I'm weak, that I can't make it on my own. Alara understood that pride, that desperate need to prove you could survive without help, without compassion, without anyone seeing how much you were struggling. Kai, can I tell you something? She waited until he reluctantly met her eyes. When I was rejected by Alpha King Magnus, I was so ashamed that I tried to refuse my father's help, tried to leave without money, without supplies, without anything, because accepting help felt like admitting I'd failed. What changed your mind? My father. He said something that stuck with me. Alara's throat tightened with the memory. He said pride is a luxury. Survival requires practicality. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept help when it's offered. Kai was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the worn spine of his book. What if I'm not good at it? He asked finally, voice small. What if I try and I fail and I'm still useless? Then you'll have tried, which is more than you're doing now. Alara softened her tone. Kai, you're 11 years old. You're not supposed to have all the answers yet. You're not supposed to be perfectly competent at everything. You're supposed to be learning, growing, figuring out who you are. I'm the crippled orphan. That's who I am. No, that's what happened to you. It's not who you are. Alara stood and offered her hand. Come to the clinic tomorrow morning. Try it for one day. If you hate it, you never have to come back. But give yourself the chance to find out if you're good at something besides surviving. Kai stared at her extended hand for a long moment. Then slowly, he took it and pulled himself to his feet. One day, he agreed quietly. One day, Alara confirmed. As she left the dormitory, she heard whispers following her, saw the judgment in watching eyes. The rejected Luna candidate was taking in strays now, making a project of a boy who'd never amount to anything, trying to fix someone else because she couldn't fix herself. Let them talk. Let them judge. Alara had spent 6 months caring too much about other people's opinions. She was done with that. Kai showed up at the clinic just after dawn, so early that Alara hadn't even lit all the lamps yet. "You came," she said, genuinely surprised. "I said I would." Kai's tone was defensive, like he expected her to mock him for his earnestness. "Come in. Let me show you around." The clinic was one large room with storage closets for supplies and medicines. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of dried herbs, prepared tinctures, bandages, and surgical tools. A long work table dominated the center, currently covered with herbs Alara had been sorting. "This is rosemary," she said, picking up a sprig. "Good for circulation and minor pain. And this is yarrow, excellent for stopping bleeding. Can you smell the difference?" She held them out. Kai leaned forward and sniffed carefully, his brow furrowing with concentration. "The rosemary is sharper. More clean?" "Exactly. Good." Alara smiled. "Most people can't distinguish scents that well on their first try. You have a talent for it." Kai's face flushed with pleasure at the praise. How long, Alara wondered, had it been since anyone complimented him on anything? They spent the morning going through basic herbs. Kai absorbed information like a sponge, asking intelligent questions, making connections Alara hadn't expected from someone his age. "If yarrow stops bleeding," he asked at one point, "and rosemary improves circulation, would they work together? Or would they cancel each other out?" "That's an excellent question." Alara pulled down a medical text. "Let's look it up together." They were so absorbed in the reading that neither of them noticed the clinic door opening until a voice said coldly, "How domestic." Alara looked up to find Senna standing in the doorway, her expression sour. "Can I help you?" Alara asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Just checking on our newest charity case." Senna's gaze raked over Kai, who'd gone very still. "Making sure he's not slowing you down too much." "He's not. He's actually quite skilled." "Of course you'd say that." "Wouldn't want to admit you've taken on a burden." Senna moved further into the clinic. "Tell me, boy, are you enjoying playing at being useful?" Kai's hands clenched on the table, but he didn't respond. "Nothing to say? How surprising." Senna's smile was nasty. "You're very good at being quiet when people insult you. It's the only skill you've really mastered, isn't it?" "That's enough," Alara said sharply. "Is it? I'm just being honest. The boy is useless. He'll never fight, never hunt, never do any of the things real wolves do. Wasting time teaching him herb lore won't change that." Senna turned her attention to Alara. "But I suppose you two outcasts deserve each other. The failed Luna and the crippled orphan. Very touching." Rage burned hot in Alara's chest. She opened her mouth to unleash 6 months of repressed fury, but Kai beat her to it. "At least she's trying." His voice was quiet but steady. "At least she sees me as a person, instead of something to kick when she's feeling small." Senna's face went red. "How dare you? All you do is make other people feel bad so you can feel better about yourself." Kai's hands were shaking, but he kept talking. "You bully me because I can't fight back, because it's safe, because you're too scared to face anyone who might actually challenge you. You little—" "He's right." Alara stepped between them, her voice cold as winter. "You're a coward, Senna. You pick on children, you enable abuse, and you justify it all by pretending you're just being realistic. But you're not realistic. You're cruel. And I'm done tolerating it." Senna's expression twisted with fury. "You can't talk to me like that. I'll report you to the Alpha. Please do. Tell him exactly what you said to Kai. Tell him how you came into this clinic specifically to harass an 11-year-old boy. I'm sure he'll be fascinated." Alara crossed her arms. "Or you can leave, now, and not come back unless you actually need medical attention." For a moment, Alara thought Senna might attack, The Omega's whole body vibrated with rage, but ultimately, cowards rarely threw real punches. "This isn't over," Senna hissed, then stormed out. Silence filled the clinic. Alara turned to check on Kai and found him staring at his trembling hands. "I've never done that before," he said quietly. Talked back. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying." He looked up at her, something like wonder in his eyes. "But also, good?" "That's the thing about standing up for yourself." Alara squeezed his shoulder gently. "It's scary, but it's also the first step toward taking back your power." "She's going to make my life hell now." "Probably. But your life was already hell, Kai. At least now you're fighting back." Alara returned to the work table. "Come on, let's continue the lesson. The best revenge is competence." They worked until midday, when Alara sent Kai to get lunch from the pack kitchens. He left reluctantly, clearly worried about facing the dining hall alone. But he went, and that, Alara thought, was progress. She was cleaning the work table when the door opened again. This time, it was Mira, Alpha Thorn's daughter. "Lady Alara," the girl said shyly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. And please, just Alara." Mira came further into the clinic, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Is it true you're teaching Kai medicine? Herb lore and basic medical assistance?" "Yes." "That's amazing." Mira's smile was genuine. "I think it's really cool what you're doing for him. I'm not doing anything remarkable, just teaching a smart boy skills he can use." "That's not true. Everyone else gave up on him. You didn't." Mira hesitated. "Could you teach me too?" Alara blinked in surprise. "You want to learn herb lore?" "I want to learn how to help people. My mom, before she died, she used to help in the clinic sometimes. I remember her making poultices and treating small injuries. I want to learn that." "Does your father know you're here?" "Not yet, but he won't mind. He keeps saying I need to find something that interests me besides reading." Mira's expression turned pleading. "Please, I promise I'll work hard. I won't be a burden." The echo of Kai's words struck Alara's heart. These children, taught from birth that their worth was measured by how little trouble they caused. "You could never be a burden," Alara said firmly. "And I would be happy to teach you. But we should probably get your father's permission first." Mira's face fell slightly, but she nodded. "I'll ask him tonight." After the girl left, Alara sat down heavily on the clinic bench. In the span of a few days, she'd gone from invisible and isolated to a teacher, a defender of outcasts, a magnet for the pack's unwanted children. She'd come to Fernwick to hide, to lick her wounds in obscurity until the shame of rejection faded enough for her to figure out what came next. Instead, she was building something, creating purpose from humiliation, finding strength in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Maybe, Alara thought, her rejection hadn't been the end of her story. Maybe it had just been the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine established itself. Kai arrived at the clinic every morning just after dawn. His hunger for knowledge was insatiable. He absorbed everything Alara taught him about herbs, treatments, wound care, and pack medicine. More importantly, he began to walk with his head up, to speak without flinching, to take up space instead of apologizing for existing. Mira joined them 3 days a week, with Alpha Thorn's grudging permission. The girl was bright and enthusiastic, asking questions that pushed even Alara's knowledge. And having Mira there seemed to give Kai confidence. If the Alpha's daughter thought herb lore was worthwhile, it must truly matter. But not everyone was pleased with the arrangement. The bullying didn't stop. It got worse, more targeted, more vicious. Someone stole Kai's books from the dormitory and burned them in the training yard. Another time, his few possessions were thrown in the mud. The young males who'd tormented him before grew bolder, pushing him in corridors, accidentally knocking into his bad leg. And the Omegas, led by Senna, started a whispering campaign about how Alara was using Kai for attention. how she was trying to elevate herself by taking in a charity case. How the boy would have been better off if she'd just left him alone instead of giving him false hope. Alara endured it with gritted teeth. She'd survived worse, but watching Kai's hard-won confidence erode under constant assault was harder than enduring her own humiliation had ever been. 3 weeks after Kai started working in the clinic, everything came to a head. Alara was in the herb gardens behind the pack house, harvesting late-season plants before the first hard freeze. It was peaceful work, meditative, and she was so absorbed that she didn't notice anyone approaching until she heard Kai's voice, high and frightened. "Leave me alone! I don't want to fight you!" Alara dropped her basket and ran toward the sound. She found Kai backed against the garden wall by 4 of his usual tormentors, including Mikkel. The beta's son held a stick in his hand, using it to jab at Kai's bad leg. "Come on, cripple, show us what you've learned. Show us how studying plants makes you useful." "Yeah, maybe you can bore us to death with herb facts," another boy jeered. Kai's face was white with fear and fury. His hands were clenched into fists, but he couldn't fight back. Even if his leg worked properly, he was outweighed and outnumbered. "I said leave me alone," Kai said again, his voice shaking. "Or what? You'll tell your new mommy?" Mikkel's tone was mocking. "Oh wait, you don't have a mommy. You're just a—" Alara moved without thinking. She grabbed Mikkel's stick mid-swing and ripped it from his hand with enough force to send the boy stumbling backward. "Enough!" Her voice was quiet, deadly. "You want to fight someone? Fight me." Mikkel recovered his balance, his face flushing with embarrassment. "You can't." "I can and I am. You're so eager to prove your strength. Prove it against someone who can actually fight back." Alara's training kicked in, the combat skills she'd learned as a Luna candidate. Her stance shifted, balanced and ready. "Come on, Beta's son, show me what you've got." The boys exchanged uncertain looks. They'd been raised to respect rank, and despite her disgrace, Alara still carried the authority of someone born to lead. "This is stupid," one of them muttered. "Let's just go." But Mikkel's pride was stung. "She's just a failed Luna. She's nothing. Then you should have no problem accepting my challenge." Alara didn't move, didn't blink. "Unless you're afraid?" That did it. Mikkel rushed her with all the graceless aggression of an untrained youth. Alara sidestepped easily, stuck out her foot, and sent him sprawling into the dirt. The move was basic, something she'd learned at 12, but it was effective. Mikkel scrambled up, face red with humiliation and rage. This time, when he charged, Alara didn't just evade. She caught his arm, used his momentum against him, and put him on his back with enough force to knock the wind from his lungs. "Anyone else?" Alara looked at the other 3 boys. They backed away, shaking their heads. "Good choice." Alara turned her attention back to Mikkel, who was gasping like a landed fish. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave Kai alone, all of you. And if I hear that you've so much as looked at him wrong, I will make sure everyone in this pack knows that 4 trained young warriors were afraid to face 1 failed Luna candidate. Do we understand each other?" Mikkel nodded weakly. "I can't hear you." "Yes," he gasped. "We understand." "Excellent. Now get out of my sight." The boys fled, Mikkel limping and holding his ribs. Alara's hands were shaking with adrenaline. She'd just assaulted the beta's son. There would be consequences. Serious ones. But when she turned and saw Kai's face, awed and grateful, and for the first time truly hopeful, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. "Are you all right?" she asked, moving to check him over. "I'm fine. But you just—" Kai couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "You fought for me, actually fought." "Of course I did." Alara squeezed his shoulder. "What kind of teacher would I be if I let my student get hurt? I'm not just your student, though, am I?" Kai's voice was quiet, wondering. "You've been protecting me. teaching me, making sure I eat enough. You're—" He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Alara's throat tightened. She wasn't his mother, wasn't his family, was just a disgraced Luna candidate who'd gotten attached to a wounded boy because she saw her own pain reflected in his eyes. But maybe that was enough. "Come on," she said, voice rough. "Let's get back to the clinic. I need to teach you about treating bruised ribs. For educational purposes." "Alara?" Kai's hand caught her sleeve. "Thank you, for everything, for seeing me." "You were always worth seeing, Kai. You just needed someone willing to look." They walked back together, and for the first time since her rejection, Alara felt like she might actually be worth something too. The summons to Alpha Thorn's office arrived that evening. Alara went without argument, knowing what awaited her. The beta would be there, demanding consequences for his son's humiliation. The pack elders would insist she be punished, and Thorn would have no choice but to comply. She'd crossed a line. Consequences were inevitable. But when she entered the office, she found only Thorn and Mira. The Alpha sat behind his desk, his daughter standing beside him with crossed arms and a stubborn set to her jaw. "Sit," Thorn said. Alara sat, keeping her spine straight. Whatever came next, she'd face it with dignity. "You fought Mikkel today," Thorn said. "It wasn't a question. I defended Kai from 4 boys who were tormenting him, one of whom attacked me first. That's not how the beta is telling it. I'm sure it's not." Alara kept her voice level. "But that's what happened. If you'd like witnesses, the entire herb garden staff saw it." Thorn was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something Alara didn't expect. "Mikkel has been a problem. This isn't the first complaint I've had about his behavior." "Dad's been trying to handle it diplomatically," Mira added, "but the beta just makes excuses, says boys will be boys, and Mikkel is just high-spirited." "Today crossed a line, though," Thorn continued. 4 trained young warriors against 1 disabled boy. And when you intervened to protect him, Mikkel attacked you. That gives me grounds to act without insulting the beta." Alara blinked. "I don't understand. You're not punishing me?" "For defending someone weaker from multiple attackers? No." Thorn's expression was grave. "But I am concerned about the situation you've created. You've made yourself a target by taking Kai under your protection. The bullying is escalating because you've given them a new way to hurt him, by going through you. So what do you suggest I do? Abandon him? I suggest you make it official." Thorn pulled out a document from his desk drawer. "I'm offering you a position as pack medic. Official rank, official responsibilities. You'll oversee the clinic, treat injuries, and yes, train apprentices, including Kai." Alara stared at the paper. "Why?" "Because my daughter is right. We've been failing our weakest members, and you're the first person in years who's had the courage to call us out on it." Thorn's voice was quiet. "My mate used to say that a pack's strength isn't measured by its warriors. It's measured by how it treats those who can't fight. We've forgotten that lesson. You're reminding us." "Dad," Mira said softly, touching his arm. "Tell her the rest." Thorn's jaw tightened. Then, "If you accept this position, I'm also offering you the option to formally foster Kai. Make him your legal responsibility. Give him a family." The world seemed to stop. "Foster?" Alara's voice came out as a whisper. "But I'm nobody. I'm a rejected Luna candidate. I have no status, no—" "You have exactly what he needs. Someone who sees his worth. Someone willing to fight for him. Someone who can give him a future." Thorn's expression softened slightly. "You don't have to decide now. Think about it. But Alara, you've already been acting like his family for weeks. This just makes it official." Alara's hands shook as she reached for the document, read it carefully. Medic position, decent salary, rank that commanded respect, and attached to it, a fostering application for 1 Kai Fernwick, orphan, age 11. It was everything she hadn't known she wanted, and terrifying beyond measure. "Can I ask him first?" Alara looked up at Thorn. "Before I decide, he should have a say." "Of course, he's in the waiting room actually. Mira, would you?" Mira ducked out and returned moments later with Kai, who looked pale and frightened. "Am I in trouble?" the boy asked immediately. "No," Thorn assured him. "We just have a question for you." He gestured to Alara. "Ask him." Alara's mouth was dry. This was too important to mess up, too life-changing for both of them. "Kai," she said carefully, "how would you feel about me becoming your legal guardian, officially fostering you and becoming your family?" Kai went very still. His eyes were huge. "You mean like adoption?" "Something like that, yes. You'd live with me instead of the dormitory. I'd be responsible for you, your education, your well-being, your future." Alara's voice cracked. "You'd be mine, if you want that." "Why?" Kai's voice was small, disbelieving. "Why would you want me?" The question broke Alara's heart. "Because you're brilliant and kind and resilient. Because you've survived years of cruelty and somehow haven't become cruel yourself. Because teaching you has been the most fulfilling thing I've done in my entire life." Alara crossed to kneel in front of him, taking his hands. "Because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for, someone who deserves a family. And I would be honored to be that family, if you'll have me." Tears streamed down Kai's face. "I don't understand. You're important. You're a Beta's daughter, a Luna candidate. You're just one of the best things that's ever happened to me." Alara cut him off gently. "So what do you say? Want to be officially stuck with a failed Luna as your guardian?" Kai's answer was to throw his arms around her neck and sob into her shoulder. "I'll take that as a yes," Alara said, her own tears flowing freely now. Thorn cleared his throat roughly. "I'll file the paperwork. You two can move into one of the family cottages by week's end." "Thank you, Alpha," Alara managed. "Don't thank me. Just keep being what this pack needs, even when it's uncomfortable." The next few weeks transformed everything. Alara and Kai moved into a small cottage on the pack lands, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a common area that was more space than either of them had ever had to themselves. Kai bloomed under proper care. With regular meals and no constant fear, he gained weight and confidence. His bad leg would never be perfect, but with exercises Alara taught him and a properly fitted brace she commissioned from the pack leatherworker, his mobility improved significantly. More importantly, he laughed, made jokes, brought home interesting rocks and plants to study, acted like the child he'd never been allowed to be. Alara's official position as pack medic gave her authority to make changes. She reorganized the clinic, improved the medicine stores, and started training sessions for anyone interested in learning basic healing. Mira became her most dedicated student, showing a real talent for diagnosis. The bullying didn't disappear entirely, but it lost its teeth. Kai had backup now, a home, someone who would fight for him. And gradually, other pack members began to see what Alara had seen from the start, that the useless cripple was actually a brilliant healer in training with skills that would serve the pack for decades. 3 months after the fostering became official, Alara was working late in the clinic when Alpha Thorn appeared at the door. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. "Of course, Alpha." Alara set aside the tincture she'd been preparing. "Is someone injured?" "No. I wanted to talk to you about something else." Thorn moved into the clinic, looking uncomfortable. "You've done remarkable work here, not just with Kai but with the clinic, with changing our pack culture. The elders have noticed, other packs have noticed." "I'm just doing my job." "You're doing more than that. You're showing us what leadership actually looks like." Thorn paused. "Which is why I'm asking if you'd consider taking on a formal advisory role. Not Beta. Marta holds that position, but as senior medic and pack advisor on social welfare." Alara blinked. "That's a significant role." "You've already been doing it unofficially. This just recognizes it formally. and gives you the authority to continue making the changes we need. What changed your mind? 3 months ago, you barely tolerated me. 3 months ago, I was so buried in my grief and duty that I couldn't see what was happening in my own pack. Thorn's expression was pained. You forced me to look, forced me to see the wolves we were failing, including my own daughter, who desperately needed someone to show her that women could be strong and compassionate simultaneously. Mira is extraordinary all on her own. She is, but she needed a role model who wasn't her dead mother or her grieving father. Thorn met Alara's eyes. Thank you for saving more than just Kai. After he left, Alara stood in the quiet clinic and tried to process what had just happened. She'd come to Fernwick in disgrace, a failure, a cautionary tale about aiming too high. And somehow, in protecting a wounded boy, she'd found her true purpose, had built something that mattered more than any Luna crown ever could. When she got home that night, Kai was at the table working on his herb studies. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting with the kind of unconditional joy she'd only ever dreamed of inspiring. "How was your day?" he asked. "Life-changing," Alara replied with a smile. "But I'll tell you about it over dinner. How were your studies?" "Good. I think I figured out that combination you asked about. Want to see?" They spent the evening talking about herbs and treatments and pack gossip, and Alara realized with a start that she was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way she'd never been while chasing the Luna title. She'd lost everything she thought she wanted, and found everything she actually needed. Later, after Kai had gone to bed, Alara stood in the doorway of his room and watched him sleep. This boy who'd been tortured and dismissed, who'd been told every day that he was worthless, a burden, better off dead. He was hers now. Her son in all the ways that mattered. And she would spend the rest of her life making sure he never doubted his worth again. "Sleep well, my brave boy," she whispered. She closed the door softly and went to her own room, where the official document hung on the wall. Her medic certification and the fostering papers side by side. Alara touched them gently, remembering that rainy day when she'd first seen Kai surrounded by his tormentors. She'd been so lost then, so convinced her life was over. But standing between that boy and his bullies had been the first step toward finding herself again. Every Omega had bullied the weak pup. They'd kicked down because they felt powerless, until a rejected Luna candidate made him her own, and in doing so, proved that true strength wasn't about crowns or status or perfect mate bonds. It was about protecting those who needed protection. Standing up when others stood by. Choosing love when the world demanded pride. Alara had been rejected by an alpha king, but she'd been chosen by a wounded boy who needed her. And that, she thought as she drifted off to sleep, was worth more than any crown ever could be. When Alara stood beside Kai during his 12th birthday celebration 6 months later, the entire pack in attendance, she made an announcement that would echo through the territory. Today, we celebrate not just Kai's birthday, but his transformation. A year ago, this boy was told daily that he was worthless, that his disability made him a burden, that the pack would be better off without him. Today, he's my top apprentice, training to be Fernwick's next head medic. He's brilliant, dedicated, and proof that worth has nothing to do with how fast you can run. She pulled Kai close. My son has taught me the most important lesson of my life, that being rejected from what you thought you wanted can push you toward what you actually need. And sometimes, the family you choose matters infinitely more than the crown you lost. The pack howled their approval. Even the wolves who'd once tormented Kai joined in, shamed into better behavior by his undeniable competence. That night, as they walked home together, Kai asked quietly, "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me instead of trying again for a Luna position?" "Never, not for a second." Alara squeezed his shoulder. "You gave me something no crown ever could, purpose, and a reason to be proud of who I am, not what I almost was." "I love you," Kai said simply. "I love you too, brave boy, always." They stood together under the moon, two outcasts who'd found each other across the divide of status and circumstance and pain. The rejected Luna and the bullied pup, the broken woman and the wounded child. Now they were family, and that made them stronger than either had ever been alone. When Alara stood between Kai and his tormentors that cold afternoon, she wasn't thinking about redemption or purpose. She was just done watching cruelty go unchallenged. Have you ever found yourself in a moment where doing the right thing cost you something, but gave you back more than you lost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in stories about found family, second chances, and the strength it takes to protect the vulnerable, subscribe and join our pack. Remember, sometimes being rejected from your dream is the universe pushing you toward your purpose. And sometimes the family you choose matters more than the crown you lost.